Heartwarming moment. Cops handcuff their new chief in uniform, discover his incredible journey. Mark Thompson adjusted his crisp new uniform, pride swelling in his chest as he walked into the station. But with that pride came a heavy weight, the expectations of a community skeptical of change. Each step through the familiar streets echoed memories years spent patrolling, learning the intricacies, the strengths, and the vulnerabilities of his town. You could practically feel the warmth of barbecues filling the air, parents cheering for their kids. But underneath it all, a current of doubt rippled through the smiles. Mark had fought tirelessly to rise from humble beginnings. His single mother worked multiple jobs, yet she instilled in him the core values of hard work and compassion. Now, as the new police chief, many were not sure he was the right choice. Could someone like him genuinely connect with the long-held traditions of law enforcement? During the annual summer festival, the tension flared. Laughter turned to shouts as a dispute erupted among local families, cutting through the festive atmosphere like a knife. In that chaos, Mark caught sight of a familiar face, his estranged brother, Jake, caught in the mix. Memories of shared childhood flashed before him, twisting at his heartstrings. Could he truly serve the law while protecting a family member steeped in trouble? Every instinct screamed for him to free Jake, but his duty loomed large. The deeper Mark got into the fray, trying to bridge the gap between the factions, the more the crowd took notice. Some murmured doubts about his leadership, while others expressed resentment rooted in his background. Just when it seemed hopeless, the situation spiraled further out of control. The festival's cheer collapsed into uncertainty, drawing national attention. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that is happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. The atmosphere charged. Mark felt the heat of judgment closing in. Just as he was about to speak up, his own officers took an unexpected stand, handcuffing him in an emotional display of solidarity. Shock gripped the onlookers, a mix of confusion and admiration etched on their faces. Tears stung his eyes. This was more than just turmoil, it was a revelation. As silence fell, Mark faced the crowd, urgent words on the tip of his tongue about acceptance and collaboration. A moment hung in the air before a fierce realization set in. This was about more than policing. This was about healing the heart of the community, rewriting destinies where boundaries had long been drawn. Every face in that crowd, once skeptical, now reflected curiosity and tentative hope. Mark felt a flicker of unity begin to spark, a chance to transform this fractured moment into understanding. But would his connection to Jake, the very embodiment of those fractures, be the collapse of his dreams or the bridge to something new? With the weight of history resting on his shoulders and the eyes of the town upon him, the future hung in delicate balance, waiting to see if reconciliation was truly possible. Mark stood there, handcuffed but anchored by the unexpected show of support. The silence that followed was almost deafening, yet it felt like a communal pause, not just of disbelief, but of reflection. The faces around him slowly softened, disbelief twisted into a cautious understanding. Why are they doing this? A voice rang out from the crowd, still shaken by the recent chaos. It's a reminder, isn't it? Another replied, that we're all in this together. As people began to murmur and shift their attention, Mark seized the moment. He glanced at the officers, who nodded encouragingly, urging him to step forward. It wasn't just a team protecting him. They were inviting him into this newfound connection. Listen, he called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I know many of you are thinking about the past, about George, and our history with the department. But I want to speak directly to you as both your chief and your neighbor. We're all family here. His words hung in the air, resonating with emotions long buried. He could see hearts beginning to soften, tension loosening, just a bit. You might not trust me, and that's okay, Mark continued, finding strength in his vulnerability. But if you can find it in your hearts, let us fight together to build a better tomorrow. Reminders of the community's struggles surfaced in his mind: the runaway kids, the drug problems, the petty crimes that chipped away at everyone's peace. Then he spotted Jake just behind the crowd, looking lost and vulnerable. The sight made his chest tighten. Was he still a part of this community, even after all the pain? Mark wanted to help his brother, yet every instinct told him to tread lightly. The murmurs grew louder as people exchanged glances, and slowly, a hand shot up in a gesture of agreement. "Yes, right," shouted an older woman from the back, her voice quavering slightly. "It's time we come together." One by one, others raised their voices, sharing stories of loss and hope, moments when the community had come through for them. Mark felt the weight of shame lift slightly. Maybe this was the bridge he had longed for, a shared acknowledgement that despite their differences, they were still capable of connection. But just as the atmosphere shifted, Jake stepped forward, panic evident in his eyes. "Mark, don't listen to them," he pleaded. "This isn't the way to go," the crowd faltered. Tension returned as they turned their focus back to Mark. Gaze caught between anger and brotherly love. He felt the earth tilting beneath him. "Jake, I want to help you," Mark said, voice thick with emotion, "but I can't if you keep choosing this path." His heart raced. Every part of fighting for his brother felt like betraying his duty. Would he risk it all to save Jake? Would loyalty to blood overrule the call for justice? The community shifted. Whether they accepted his brother or rejected him would hang heavily on Mark's next words. He needed to find a way to bring them all together while clinging to his values. But just as he was about to speak, a loud crash echoed behind him. The festival's main tent buckled under a sudden gust of wind, sending people scrambling. Suddenly, all eyes were back on the chaos, and Mark realized this was the moment he'd been awaiting, the chance to lead not just with authority, but with humanity. Could he guide his brother back, while also helping the community rise from this storm? The path ahead loomed uncertain and full of peril, yet glimmered with the hope of change. "Let us get to work," Mark shouted above the commotion. Together. As he moved into action, he could feel the gaze of the crowd shifting, curiosity replaced by willingness. But how would the next move unfold, and could he gain the trust needed to heal the rifts? With his brother behind him and the community around him, Mark knew the next steps they took would define everything. Mark surged forward through the chaos, heart hammering as shouts mixed with the rustling debris. He felt adrenaline surge, each step pulling him deeper into the fray, drawing the crowd behind him. "Grab what you can," he yelled, his voice booming with a newfound authority. "We'll set things right." People sprang into action, some still wary of him, but driven by the urgency of the moment. He reached the fallen pole of the tent and, with a few others, began to lift it back up. The scene pulsed with frantic energy as the community worked together, a vivid tapestry of different backgrounds intertwining. "Mark, over here," shouted a voice he recognized. It was Lisa, a local shop owner. Her eyes gleamed with determination as she pulled away a flap of the tent, freeing a couple of trapped chairs. "We need to make sure everyone gets out." "Right." Mark nodded, rushing over to her side. Together, they tugged at the fabric, revealing a small group huddled together, shaken but unharmed. Seeing them safe ignited something deep within him, a burning desire to protect and rebuild. Jake stayed behind, observing the scene unfold with a mix of confusion and fear. Mark shot him a glance, silently pleading with his brother to step forward to join them. But Jake remained rooted, struggling to reconcile the chaotic upheaval with what he long considered his place in the world. "Come on, Jake," Mark called, his heart aching for him. "We can do this together. You can be part of this." Finally, Jake moved, albeit slowly. As if answering an instinct buried deep, he reached for a fallen banner. Mark held his breath, watching his brother approach, especially after hearing him speak out against unity just moments before. The tight grip of denial on Jake's heart was beginning to loosen, and perhaps hope flickered within. "We need to hold it steady," Mark directed, seeing Jake's shyness seep into his actions. "You've got this, bro. Just help." Gathering courage, Jake positioned himself beside Mark. The two began to stabilize the structure together, hand in hand, their connection rekindling amidst the mess of the tent. In that moment, the past began to melt away, revealing the possibility of a new path. The air felt lighter as whispers of encouragement fanned through the hastily formed teamwork. Seemingly invisible barriers crumbled as more people joined in, working to rebuild and repair not just the tent, but the trust within their community. Mark caught sight of Lisa again, now trying to calm terrified children. He felt a swell of pride that everyone was working side by side. Light shone through the rips of canvas, like a signal of hope breaking through the storm. Then, the old woman from before stepped to the front. "We're stronger together," she called, her voice finding power amidst the noise. "Yes, we have differences, but we're alive, and that counts for something." The crowd began to echo her sentiments, newfound strength in the harmony of their voices. Each cheer peeled back layers of doubt, piecing together a vision of a united front ready to tackle any challenge. But just as a sense of alignment surged through the gathering, the wind shifted again. Dark clouds gathered above them, a reminder that storms were not over yet. Murmurs of concern rippled through the people as they glanced at the sky. "What do we do now?" Jake asked, suddenly unsure, staring at the brewing storm. Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation settle onto his shoulders once more. He'd already come so far, but the real test was just beginning. He faced his brother, unwavering. "We keep fighting. We face whatever's next together." As the crowd fell silent, the storm looming upon them, Mark understood that the next moments would be pivotal. He had to not only steer his community, but also mend the fragile bond with his brother. What remained out there, waiting? Would the community draw upon the strength they'd just unlocked? Or would old fears and resentments once again pull them apart? The uncertainty hung heavy as Mark prepared to confront whatever lay ahead. The wind whipped around them, raising a chorus of whispers and worried glances. Mark felt it biting at his skin, but adrenaline coursed through him, heating his resolve. Jake shifted at his side, anxiety radiating from him like a distant drumbeat. "Mark," Jake's voice trembled slightly. What if they don't want to fight anymore?" Mark turned to his brother, searching for the courage he felt deep inside. "They will, Jake. Look at what we've done so far. We started something here." As if summoned by his words, Lisa, with dirt smudged on her cheeks, charged back into the fray. "Everyone, let us form a line. We've got to keep this area clear. If that storm hits, we need to be ready." She swept her arms towards the crowd, igniting a spark of action. Mark watched as people gathered, drawn by her call. There were still faces filled with doubt, but the desire to protect their loved ones surged over it, like waves crashing over the rocks. Jake hesitated, caught in a conflicting spiral of fear and determination. Mark started, but Lisa interrupted, her eyes locking onto the two brothers. "You both have to help us. Grab some ropes," she instructed, her tone firm yet filled with warmth. Jake gulped, and something in that moment shifted for him. The recognition that he was needed lit a flicker in his chest. He glanced again at Mark, who nodded encouragingly. Together they sprinted towards the pile of supplies, a rush of purpose pushing them forward. Mark's hands trembled as he grabbed the ropes, feeling the coarse fibers biting into his skin. His heart raced, memories of the past washing over him. Memories of times when he stepped back while Jake bore the brunt of pain. But not today. Today he wouldn't let them slip away again. By the time they returned, people were gathered in a loose circle, awaiting direction. Mark felt like a fire had been lit within him. "All right, everyone," he called, needing to match the urgency in the air. "We'll tie back any loose canvases and secure the poles. Keep an eye on the kids, let us work fast, and keep moving." Hands shot up in agreement, and the once fearful faces transformed into a mosaic of determination. As they began the laborious task of securing the tent, laughter bubbled amidst hard work. Together they tugged, pulled, and secured, building not just a tent, but a shelter of unity. Jake was beside him, tying down a stray flap when Mark caught him grinning. Relieved, he felt a surge of hope. "You're doing amazing," he praised. The words hung in the air, a lifeline for both of them. But then a crack of thunder echoed, shaking the ground beneath them. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The darkness in the sky seemed to deepen, pressing down as if it wanted to crush their hard-won spirit. "We need to move," Lisa shouted, determination etching her features. "Everyone, back to the food vans. We'll take shelter there." Mark's heart sank, a knot tightening in his stomach. He had hoped they could hold the tent until the storm passed, but reality was sharp. "Follow Lisa," he shouted, grabbing Jake's shoulder. "Come on." As the group surged forward, a collective fear took hold, but also resilience. Mark could feel the tension in Jake, and it made him realize this was more than about the storm. They needed to prove to themselves and each other that they were capable of facing both the winds outside and the tempests within. "Stay close," Mark urged, but as the crowd jostled, he felt Jake slip away from his grasp. Panic shot through him as he spun around. Jake! His brother was looking back, a storm of emotions battling across his face, a moment caught between moving forward and retreating into past shadows. Mark fought through the pressing bodies, allowing not just the chaos of the storm, but the fears they had faced over the years to propel him forward. "Jake!" he shouted again, desperation creeping into his mouth. And then, through the throng, he caught a glimpse of Jake, who was hesitating near the edge. As Mark closed the distance, a powerful rumble shook the ground, the warning of a storm, but also a reminder of how fragile their journey remained. Would Jake step into the light or back into the shadows? Would they all unite against the storm? The answers loomed as dark clouds churned above them, waiting for the moment they would all have to face their fears head-on. Mark's heart raced. The panic in his chest echoed loudly as he pushed forward. The chaos of the crowd felt like a raging river, but he had to reach Jake. That bond they shared couldn't break. Not now. Not when everything felt so precarious. "Jake!" he shouted once more, forcing his way past bodies that seemed to block his way like an impenetrable wall. Each step felt like a small victory, even as the clouds darkened above them. Jake's face twisted with confusion, and for a moment, Mark could see the weight of their past pressing down on him, threatening to pull him under. He was caught in the moment, the fear tangling with memories of a time when Mark had always been there for him. "Mark," Jake replied, his voice broken, the distance between them feeling like an eternity. "Come on. We need to go." Jake hesitated, just a breath too long. Mark's world narrowed down to his brother and the choice before him. He wasn't alone in this battle. They were a team. Together, they could face anything. This moment held more than just a storm, it held their entire relationship. Mark reached out, desperation giving him strength. "You can't pull away now, Jake. We fight together. That's how we survive." The realization hit Jake as if the thunderclap overhead had awakened him from a long, heavy sleep. Mark saw the flicker of recognition in his brother's eyes, the understanding that they were stronger together, no matter how fierce the storm was. He stepped forward, breaking the invisible barrier that had held him back. "Okay, let us go," Jake shouted, and as he came back to Mark's side, a surge of relief washed over him. It wasn't just about weathering the storm outside. It was about standing strong against the dark memories that loomed in the corners of their minds. They took off together, falling into step in the anxiously moving crowd. Lisa was yelling orders, trying to keep everyone focused and moving towards the food vans. Their energy was contagious, igniting the drive in others to push ahead. "Stick together." Lisa's voice rang out, and Mark caught her eye. She was a pillar of strength, unwavering under pressure, and it boosted his resolve. As they turned the corner, the wind howled around them, blasting cold air against their skin. The sight of the food vans sparked a flicker of hope, a beacon of safety in the swirling tempest. Yet the heavens did not relent. Another flash of lightning lit the sky, and for a moment, Mark saw the fear reflected in everyone's faces. But in the midst of that fear, he also saw determination. People were moving, listening to Lisa's voice, working together as one, an unstoppable force against the chaos. The laughter and chatter from moments before melted into a solemn understanding that they were in this together, and together they would prevail. Mark's grip tightened around Jake's shoulder, a silent promise. They would navigate through the storm side by side. If they could endure this moment, they could overcome anything life threw at them. Just as they neared the vans, a sudden loud crash erupted behind them. Mark spun around to see part of the tent collapse under the fury of the wind, sending fabric and poles flying. The loud noise sliced through the last threads of calm. "We have to help." Mark felt the instinct grab him, but he turned to Lisa first, scanning for her reaction. "Stay put. We'll regroup in a minute," Lisa shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. Mark felt his heart pound again, torn between helping the people still near the tent and the urgency to move toward safety. He glanced down at Jake, who was absorbing the scene with wide eyes. Mark understood the conflict mirrored in his brother's heart. "Jake, what do we do?" he asked, knowing they had to make a choice together. But before Jake could respond, Another wave of wind slammed into them, roaring like a beast. The ground felt unstable, and in that moment, Mark recognized the choice they faced wasn't just about safety, but about defining their newfound unity. Would they run towards safety and survival, or would they risk everything to provide help? One last time, Mark took a deep breath, ready to find out, not only for himself, but for the bond he shared with his brother. What could they choose when it mattered most? Mark felt the wind whip around them like a wild animal, pulling at his jacket and making it hard to think straight. The chaos was growing. He was torn, feeling the weight of people's lives crumpling under the tent, and there was a fire in him that demanded action. "Jake, we can't just leave them," he said, his voice rising above the chaos as he took a step back toward the fallen tent. Jake's brow furrowed, eyes darting from the disaster to his brother. What if it's too dangerous? Mark's heartbeat thundered in his ears. And what if we can help? We owe them that much, don't we? Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mark could see Jake wrestle with the decision, battling his own fears, but knowing deep down that a choice had to be made. This was about more than just survival. It was about their humanity, about what they stood for as brothers and as people. "Okay then, we help," Jake finally said, determination rising in his voice. Mark felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. They turned back toward the collapsing tent, sprinting against the wind that seemed determined to shove them away. They approached the chaos, and it was like entering another world entirely. People were trapped beneath heavy canvas, bewildered cries punctuating the howling winds. "Hey, over here," Mark shouted, his voice almost swallowed by the storm. He and Jake reached out to pull aside the open flaps. Inside, a few faces turned toward them, wide with fear and urgency. "Help us. We can't get out," a man yelled, struggling to move beneath a heavy piece of the tent's frame. Jake took a split second to assess the situation and flung his body down, pushing against the tangled mass of fabric. Mark joined him, adrenaline surging as they worked together, pulling and lifting. It was difficult, but with each inch gained, they felt their unity grow even stronger. "Come on, you can do it," Jake shouted to the trapped people, his voice a tether, a lifeline. Discovering courage was like finding light in shadow. One by one, they managed to free the people, faces emerging from the chaos, streaked with mud and fear, but also gratitude and awe. As the last person slipped free, the howling wind seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Mark and Jake straightened, panting, their hearts pounding in unison. The people they rescued surrounded them, murmuring thank yous, some even tearing up. In that moment, Mark felt an overwhelming surge of pride. They had faced the storm not just together, but alongside others, and together they had pushed through the fear. "Let us get everyone to safety," Lisa called again, the urgency returning. The storm wasn't done with them yet, and they couldn't linger. But then, amid the chaos, Mark noticed a figure in the distance, someone still pinned under the wreckage of the tent. His stomach dropped. "Wait, there's one more. We can't leave them. Are you crazy?" Jake shouted, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. "We can't go back in there." Mark hesitated, looking at his brother, the fear mirrored on Jake's face. He felt the weight of their earlier promise. "We have to do this together." But then the ground trembled again. The wind yipped like a dog hungry for a fight, and Mark knew they had to make a choice that would define them in that moment. Did they head back or flee to safety, trusting that help would come from elsewhere? Mark's heart raced. This was the moment his entire being had been waiting for. Would they stand shoulder to shoulder in the face of danger, or would fear win? His gaze locked with Jake's, and in that instant, they knew they had to choose, not just for themselves, but for everyone counting on them. What would they decide? Mark's breath caught in his throat. The wind howled again, a reminder that time was slipping away. The tent wasn't just a mass of fabric. It was a living, breathing thing that could crush someone in an instant. "Jake, I can't leave them," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Jake's hesitation struck Mark like a blow. He could see his brother weighing the risks, shoving fear aside for just a moment. "Okay, let us do it," Jake finally said, though uncertainty tinged his words. Together, they took their first step back toward the chaos, adrenaline fueling their movement. They pushed through the flaps and into the confined space where shadows lurked. Mark squinted, his heart racing as he scanned for the trapped figure. His eyes locked onto a flash of color amidst the gray wreckage. A woman's hand, lifted weakly. "Help!" she cried, her voice quaking with fear. Mark lunged forward, his body falling against the weight of the tent. "I've got you," he shouted, his hands clawing at the tangled mess of fabric, while Jake quickly joined him. The world outside faded into a low murmur as they focused solely on the task at hand. Sweat ran down Mark's forehead, mingling with the mud from the ground beneath him. "Keep pushing," Jake urged, digging deeper, their muscles straining. Mark felt the weight shift just slightly, and he shouted, "We're almost there." The woman's eyes were wide, filled with panic but also a spark of hope that made every agonizing second worth it. "I can't breathe," she gasped, panic in her voice. Mark's heart clenched. "Just a bit more. Stay with us." The urgency pushed them harder, and with each grunt, with each pull, they were lifting not just debris, but the weight of despair. Finally, they took hold of a corner and yanked with everything they had. The canvas shifted, and with one last heave, they freed her. Mark fell back, breathless, as Jake pulled her gently from beneath the wreckage. "You're safe. Thank God you're safe," he exclaimed, looking into her grateful eyes that shone with tears. "Oh, thank you. I thought I would die," she sobbed, shaking but alive. The joy of saving her flashed through Mark like a warm ember. In that moment, he felt not just relief but pride that they could make a difference. But then, the ground rumbled again, sharper this time. Mark's heart sank as he glanced at the others who had gathered, their trusting faces looking to him and Jake for what to do next. The storm's wrath was not over. They needed to get out now. "Lisa, we need help here," Mark shouted, knowing the urgency in his voice would ripple across the crowd. "Everyone follow us." Just as they turned to lead the way outside, a deafening crash rippled through the air. A large section of the tent buckled, falling dangerously close to where they stood. "Move," Jake shouted, adrenaline kicking in as they ushered everyone away from the falling debris. Mark's instincts kicked in. He glanced back at the woman, still shaken. "Go. Trust us," he yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her forward. As they stumbled out into the tumultuous winds, the sight of desperation crushed him. More people were spilling from makeshift shelter, eyes wide with fear. "This way. Stay close," Mark urged, his heart racing as they pushed forward. But in the back of his mind, doubt began to seep in. Were they moving fast enough? Would they get everyone out in time? The wind's howl now felt like a cruel joke, echoing the weight of lives still in danger. As they reached a safer spot a few moments later, Mark turned to scan the chaos, the faces around him blending into one another. There was still so much to do, so many they hadn't rescued yet. "Mark." Jake grabbed his arm, urgency radiating from him. "There's still more trapped. We can't leave them." Mark swallowed hard, the truth hitting like a punch. They had made it this far, and there was no turning back. "Then let us get everyone out." But as they prepared to move again, a loud cracking sound ripped through the air. Mark spun around, watching in horror as another part of the tent began to collapse, threatening to swallow more lives in its grip. Would this be their defining moment for better or worse? Could they truly face the storm once more? Mark barely had time to think. Fear surged through him as he saw the heavy fabric buckle. Without a second thought, he shouted, "Jake, we need to grab some poles." They sprinted toward where the structure still appeared intact, hoping it would offer stability. "Grab those." Jake pointed to a cluster of debris where several metal poles lay forgotten. They could use them to support the sagging canvas. Dashing through the wind and chaos, they collected the poles, adrenaline coursing through their veins. As Mark hoisted one up, he could feel his muscles protesting, but there was no room for weakness. "Over here," Mark yelled back, motioning to the crowd, urging them toward relative safety. "Help us keep this up. We can't let it fall." More voices rose, mingling in the storm's roar, as people began to respond, grabbing whatever they could to help. Mark felt buoyed by the collective movement, as fear shifted to determination among them. "Come on, you can do this," he encouraged the terrified faces around him. "We just need to hold it for a few minutes. Pull together." The crowd rallied, grabbing poles and pieces of tarp, creating a makeshift support system. The sight gave him hope, igniting a glow inside him that almost drowned out the biting wind. It felt like they were creating a barrier not just against the storm, but against despair. As they worked, Mark couldn't help but glance back at the woman they rescued. The gratitude in her eyes ignited a flame of purpose in him. "We won't leave you behind," he promised, scanning the area for anyone else who needed help. A low moan caught his attention. To his right, a child's figure was half covered by tangled fabric. Heart pounding, Mark rushed toward the sound, instinct pushing him forward. "Stay back," he shouted to Jake, who was about to follow. "I'll get them." Mark dove instinctively, shoving aside the debris with sheer willpower. The cries grew louder, mixing with the sound of the wind. His heart raced fast, pounding in his ears. He could feel the weight of the tent pressing down, each second weighing heavier than the last. "It's all right. I'm here," he called out. He finally uncovered the little boy, trembling with fear but alive. Relief washed over him like a tide. "Got you," Mark exclaimed, grasping the boy firmly and pulling him away from danger. "Jake!" Jake rushed up, eyes wide with relief. Together, they pulled the child free, and he fell against Mark, sobbing and shaking. "Jackson! Oh my God, Jackson!" A woman shrieked from the crowd, rushing forward as she recognized her son. Mark stepped back, allowing the reunion to unfold. The waves of gratitude washing over him were overwhelming. "Stay close to your mom," he called as the woman cradled her boy, her tears mixing with the rain. Mark turned back, but another loud crack made him freeze. A section of the structure groaned as it shifted above them. Time slowed. "No, not again. Mark, we need to move." Jake's voice sliced through the tension. With urgency, Mark shouted, "Everyone, go back. We need to find the evacuation point." But as they turned to lead the crowd, chaos erupted. The tent began to collapse in on itself, a giant wave of fabric threatening to bury them all. Panic spread like wildfire through the crowd. Mark's heart raced as he searched for a way out. "Run!" Jake shouted, pushing against the throng of frightened faces. Mark felt the weight of responsibility crash over him. It felt like all their lives depended on the choices he made in these critical seconds. They had to escape from whatever horror awaited. Just when Mark thought hope was slipping away, a small crack appeared in the writhing mass above a gap, almost welcoming. "That way," he yelled, pointing toward the barely visible opening. But would everyone remember to stay together? As they charged toward the opening, Mark could feel fear wrapping around him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the precious lives around him. Would they make it through the storm together? With every step toward the exit, the stakes grew higher. Would they emerge into safety or be swallowed by the chaos? "Stay close," Mark called out once more. Moments felt like eternity as they navigated through. What would they find on the other side? Mark squeezed through the narrow gap, pulling others along. The noise of the storm was deafening, a wild cacophony of howling wind and thrashing fabric. His heart raced as he felt the pressing weight of the tent above, each second a reminder of the danger threatening to crush them. The air was thick and cold, filled with the scent of rain-soaked earth and panic. "Keep moving. Don't look back," Jake shouted, his voice straining to be heard above the chaos. Mark glanced back, pushing aside his fear, using every inch of determination he had. He could see the crowd behind them wrestling with the remains of the structure, faces a mix of dread and desperation. The small opening drew closer, light poking through the fabric like a beacon of hope. Mark's hand shot out to grasp another pole, shoving it toward the exit. Someone pushed it aside. In a collective effort, hands reached out, shoving at the flailing fabric. As the chaos erupted around them, a frightened scream pierced the night. Mark's heart lurched. What was that? But he had no time to consider it. They had to keep moving. With one last shove, the fabric began to yield. A few people fell forward into the dark, slick mud just outside the tent, scrambling to regain their footing. Mark emerged into the open air, the stark contrast of the storm against the dim light of flashlights in the distance was overwhelming. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the sharp, icy air. Once outside, he turned to help more escape. "Come on. It's clear." Jake was right beside him, pulling another woman out from beneath the remnants of the structure. The crowd followed, emerging one by one, some crying, others shouting words of relief or fear. "Is anyone else trapped inside?" Jake's voice rose above the din. Mark hesitated, glancing back at the tent. Part of him wanted to run back in, check for anyone else, but another voice inside held him back. "We can't," He yelled desperately. The whole thing could come down. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the structure, and Mark flinched. The storm continued to rage, but a flicker of clarity appeared in the chaos of fire truck's lights flashing in the distance, cutting through the dark. The sound of sirens crested the wind, and hope bloomed anew. "Over there," Mark shouted, pointing toward the beacon of safety. "That way." The crowd surged forward, driven by fear and adrenaline. With every step away from the falling tent, the weight on Mark's shoulders lightened. He was just a thread in the fabric of this moment, yet it felt monumental. He peered back as people rushed out, some clutching their loved ones tight, others breathless with relief. Once they reached the fire truck, a sense of belonging washed over him. The storm continued, but here, under the flickering lights, families were reuniting, arms wrapped around each other in comfort. There was laughter mixed with sobs, relief breaking through the anxiety. But even in this moment of temporary safety, there was a question lingering in the back of his mind. How many were still unaccounted for? As Mark looked around, his heart sank. What is next? Do we wait for rescue, or do we search? The urgency of the situation hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Would they face another round of chaos, or could they somehow band together to find others who still needed saving? They stood there, uncertain but hopeful, waiting for direction. What would they do next? And would this storm bring them closer, or tear them apart? The wind howled like a ravenous beast, but within the cacophony, a flicker of resilience ignited in the hearts of the crowd around Mark. He stood in the shelter of the fire truck's light, eyes sweeping over the families reunited, the tears of joy mixing with rain-soaked cheeks. Jake was beside him, fear still reflected in his eyes, but glimmering with a newfound determination. "Mark, we can't just wait here. We have to make sure everyone is safe," Jake insisted, the weight of urgency pushing him forward. Mark nodded, every fiber of his being ignited with purpose. "You're right. We start organizing search teams. We can't stop now." They rallied the people around them, igniting a spark of action that threatened to outshine the storm. "Listen up," Mark called, drawing the group's attention. "We will divide into teams. No one gets left behind. Together, we can face anything." Some faces shimmered with doubt, but the pain of their shared experience forged an invisible thread of trust. Murmurs of agreement rippled. Lisa stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "I'll help organize. People need direction right now." A sense of unity took shape, stronger than the winds that howled around them. The groups formed quickly, thanks to Mark's command and Lisa's leadership. They paired off, creating a web of connections amidst the turmoil. The community was rising, hands joined together, moving as one. Each participant clung to hope, driving away the shadows of fear that gripped their hearts. Every step forward was gritty and raw, but Mark felt the weight of past mistakes lifting. Each heartbeat resonated with a collective spirit, an echo of what they could accomplish together. No one's story stood alone. They were intertwined like threads in a tapestry. "Mark, here." Jake's voice broke through his thoughts. He was pointing toward the edge of the fading tent remnants. Mark's heart leaped into his throat. Another face emerged, someone still trapped. Mark surged forward instinctively, Jake right beside him. "Stay back," he called out to a few volunteers rushing in. "We have to assess first." As they neared the tangle, they recognized the still form. It was the woman they rescued earlier. With focused urgency, they maneuvered through debris, inching closer cautiously. "You're okay. We're here," Mark reassured, fisting the torn fabric cautiously. Suddenly, the storm gave one last fierce blow, and debris shifted. Mark and Jake positioned themselves, holding parts of the wreckage as they carefully pulled her free. The moment she emerged, her eyes wide with bewilderment, yet gleaming with gratitude, it felt like the storm paused, even if just for a second. "Thank you. I thought," she stammered, relief washing over her face. "That's what we're here for," Mark offered gently, pride swelling in him. Together, they helped her move to the safety offered by the fire truck's warm lights, enveloped in a chorus of gratitude. As more faces surfaced from the chaos, hope filled the air. Mark looked around. Every face, every tear of relief was a testament to their collective strength. Each family rescued was a thread weaving them closer together. They regrouped, the circle expanding as everyone gathered for a moment of solidarity. "We've gone through hell together," Mark announced, his voice powerful and steady. "Let us keep fighting. This storm won't break us. We are stronger together, and together we can always overcome." The crowd roared, renewed energy vibrating through them. As they set out to search for the last unaccounted voices under the debris, the strength of community surged like fire through the chaos. The howling winds became nothing more than a backdrop, the sound lost against the rising tide of laughter, cheers, and determined footsteps. Mark matched Jake's gaze. They both knew this journey was just the beginning of their healing. They had weathered the storm together, not just as brothers, but as catalysts of change. In that moment, everything shifted. Mark understood that leadership wasn't only about authority. It was about connection, vulnerability, and the courage to stand up with others. The chaos had birthed a new family, a community united, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And as they forged ahead, they left shadows behind, not just over the remnants of the tent, but from a past tangled with pain. The future gleamed ahead, bright and open like the sky after a storm. Mark smiled at the people around him, their shared struggles visible, yet their hope shimmering through the uncertainty. With a renewed purpose, they all pressed forward together. They would not only rebuild the town, they would rebuild trust, connections, and lives intertwined forever. This was their moment of transformation, the dawning of a new chapter. And it was just the beginning. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right now to catch the next incredible story. You don't want to miss any of the exclusive content coming your way. Leave a like to support our channel and help us reach more hearts. Your engagement matters. Let me know in the comments how this ending made you feel. It's essential to share your thoughts with the community. And I challenge you to share this video with at least 5 friends who could use a little inspiration in their own lives. Don't wait another second. This is how we grow our amazing community.